Hi, I'm Nick, and I like comics.
And I'm Adam, and I know comics.
Welcome to another Unscripted episode where today we are asking the question, which is better, Marvel or DC?
So there's a lot of different things to think about when we decide like what would be better between two things. With Marvel and DC, they're very similar in a lot of ways. You got bright colored characters, fighting crime, doing absurd things that nobody on Earth could even imagine to do. But when I talk to people, when I worked at the comic book store and stuff, people would ask me which do I lean more towards, and it's tough to say. I used to say Marvel a lot because I felt that the characters were more relatable. And I was thinking, when I was younger, I was thinking that based on power sets. You know, Superman is so crazy powerful, there's no way I could ever feel like I could relate to his character. So, I always thought the characters like Spider-Man and whatever were more relatable because I thought an accident could cause that. I thought maybe that could happen to me. Like as a kid, you think that sort of thing.
Well, sure.
You're like, I'm not an alien from another planet. So that's what I thought as a kid. But now, growing into an adult, I realized that what makes characters relatable is more so what's happening in their lives. What type of person are they? So in that way, a lot of times, old school Marvel, that does seem the case. The 60s, they try to write it to where Peter Parker had teenager problems, or a lot of the adults, they dealt with more job-related issues, or...
Wasn't Spider-Man the first major superhero comic book where they purposefully showed him as Peter Parker most of the time? Mm-hmm. Like he was Spider-Man actually very little concerning the issues, at least whenever it first began, because they wanted teenagers and kids and stuff to relate to the character and see him as a normal person.
Right, yeah. So, but now I realize that a lot of that is the case where, characters like Superman, who their powers are so absurd I can never relate, but his daily life I could kind of get along with. He works a job and he dates a girl, or he grew up in Kansas, mm-hmm. like us,
I moved to Kansas.
You were Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas?
Missouri.
Okay, so yeah, borderline.
There you go.
But in any case, there's more to it than just like power set. And then popularity is another thing too. But Marvel does happen to have a lot of characters that people know just off the bat. Most of the main Avengers, people can recognize even before the movies. They would know Captain America, Iron Man on sight. But yeah, outside of the main three for DC, you have Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. It is kind of tougher to recognize that.
As I've shared, kind of my story with comics is I actually didn't start reading them until, 3 years ago or so. And so my history with them is not as great as Adam. I remember probably my very, very first exposure to anything comics was the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie. Mm-hmm. I remember going and seeing that with my dad. The 90s XMen cartoon show. And so, obviously, from that moment on, I was like, oh, X-Men are so awesome, which they are awesome. That was my only exposure to them. But that was really it. I did watch the Superman movies, but, comics were not a thing that I really liked. And so I probably gravitated more towards the Marvel stuff because I knew more about them. And I'm using that very, very loosely. I really didn't know about them at all. My mom is the type of person, like whenever Lord of the Rings came out, mm-hmm. my mom, everyone said to her, hey, you need to go see this movie. You need to go see this movie. You need to go see this movie. And so she literally a year ago watched them for the first time because everyone told her that it was awesome and she needed to see it. And she was like, no, I don't know why that is, mm-hmm. but whatever, that's how she was. And so back whenever, like I said before, Adam got me into HeroClix, and I started playing this game, and I was like, man, I really want to kind of get into comic books and read them. And about that time, it was when the New 52 came out. And so I just decided that I was going to like DC. Like, those are my boys. Those are the guys I'm going to like. And I think partially that had to do with everyone I talked to was a huge Marvel fanboy. Mm-hmm. And like, Marvel's the best, Marvel's awesome, DC sucks. And so I think that's really what pushed me to like DC was this idea that they sucked. Even though I was like, this can't be true. They have the greatest superhero of all time in Superman. Now, you can argue that he's not the greatest, but objectively, he is the greatest if you look at his values, if you look at his powers, if you look at all this stuff. He is the greatest superhero ever created. Now, is he the most relatable? That's questionable. Is he the most fun to read? That's questionable. But he is the greatest. Sorry, I got a booger. I really wanted to continue with that DC stuff. But really what kind of flipped me back and turned me onto Marvel was truthfully the Marvel Unlimited app. Because I could sit down and I could read a ton of comics where DC doesn't have anything like that. Right. DC, get on it. Seriously. People will buy it. People will read it. It's awesome. The Marvel Unlimited app is great. And I know you think you're going to lose money. You're not going to lose money. Seriously, do an unlimited app.
It works for Netflix. It works for Hulu. It works for Marvel.
Right. Get on it. And through that, I was able to read so much stuff. Actually, this year, my goal is to read 1,000 comics.
Haven't you already reached that?
No, I think I'm about 840 about the filming of this episode. So, and I'm going to say 90% of that is Marvel, just because of the Marvel Unlimited app. So I've read a ton of X-Men. I've always, like I said, I've always been gravitated toward X-Men, so I like the X-Men stuff. And DC, there's a counterpart. It's always like, you have one, for instance, you have Batman in the DC universe and you have Daredevil in the Marvel universe. They're not exactly the same, but they're very, very similar. Or Iron Man. There's
always going to be an analog.
Right. You have Hawkeye in Marvel and you have Green Arrow in DC. DC doesn't really have a mutant kind.
Right.
Or something to combat that with. And so that's one thing where I would maybe throw my hat into the Marvel boat, because I really like the mutants. I will say this right now, if you ask the question with specifically comic books, which is better, Marvel or DC, and I know there's like Dark Horse and IDW and Valiant and Image and all those other things. We're not talking about those, though I know that they put out great stuff.
They do.
They put out great stuff. It's just that people don't know them, really.
The people, the masses,
right.
Obviously, Image is popular enough. They've spawned stuff like The Walking Dead that has become a great phenomenon. But we're talking like between the two major superhero-centric, like arguably the firsts of their kind.
Right. Right now, comic book-wise, Marvel is killing it. I mean, that's...
Sales reflect that.
Sales reflect that. And part of that is twofold. One, this summer they did their massive event, Secret Wars, where what they decided to do was take all of the continuities that existed, put them all together, and then shake it all up, and then what comes out is one main continuity. Mm-hmm. So we no longer have the Ultimate Universe, and we no longer have these alternate futures and that kind of stuff. Everything is I don't know if they're calling it still the 616, which is the main Marvel universe, but everything is in the same universe. And so they started off with number ones, and so it's blowing up. On the flip side, DC it looks like they don't have their ish together.
Right. They've in an attempt to break some of their characters and so forth, they've taken away Superman's powers and made him a normal dude, and then Batman doesn't even know who he is. And as we kind of talked about with DC, for most, even the readers of DC, they may not really affiliate or like a lot of the other characters besides the main three. And if you break those characters for an extended amount of time, you're going to lose readers.
Right.
And I think that's what's happened. In the DCU, YOU, it's just not good.
And something that I figured out, DC has now played a major focus on story. And so some questions that I've had for a long time since the DCU has launched is, well, how come I can read Justice League and I can see Bruce Wayne as Batman and Superman has powers? Mm-hmm. And then I go into their solo books and I see that it's, well, Jim Gordon is now Batman and Superman is depowered and wears a t-shirt and jeans. And it seems that what DC has now started to do is focus on storytelling, where continuity doesn't, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't have to fit like this, like we would like it to fit.
Right.
And so that's why you can have Justice League and JLA over here doing their thing, and then Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman over here doing their thing. And so they both exist, even though it doesn't make sense that they both exist.
Which,
in a way,
I don't mind so much, because when you break it down, these characters, most of them, have been around for such a long time. They're basically their own mythos. And so it's more, it's interesting to see a mythological character being run through all these different scenarios than it is to really matter like what their daily lives constantly are changing, like a soap opera. Right. So I'm more like kind of like how they do with Sherlock Holmes and the movies and stuff, where it's a character that's been around forever. Let's just throw a new plot his way. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like with Batman or Superman and how it is, and I don't mind that so much. But with the current stories with sales and stuff, it isn't good for them.
Right. So. And to kind of wrap this whole thing up, people are like, well, what's better, And I mean that's going to be a personal. You know, Adam's. What's your opinion on it? Which one's better? Neither. I think that Marvel is at its best when DC is at its best. And DC is at its best when Marvel is at its best. Like, yes, they're in competition with each other, but if we want the comic book industry to succeed, the big boys need to be putting out good stuff.
Right.
And so, I mean, the movies, yes, we can argue, but all of this stuff is piping in, and comic books are still around because of all this other media and these, you know, fights or whatever, this competition between these other.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like DC, awesome. Read it. Love it. Do it. If you like Marvel, same thing. Okay, just keep on reading it and keep on being a part of it.
Absolutely. Because if we don't, like, if we give up on it, then it might die.
So what do you think? Are you a Marvel guy or girl? Are you a DC guy or girl? Or are you a independent comic person?
Yeah, if you're interested in letting us know, just comment below or follow us on Twitter or Facebook and give us a comment or send us a message. I mean, we want to talk about this stuff with you guys. We're very interested to know what you know, because we don't know everything.
Yep. So thanks for watching, and until next time, whatever. I'm tired of doing this ending because I don't get it. Well, I don't know what to say half the time.
No, I don't know either.
Right. So subscribe. Do that.